Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the March 12th meeting of Community Participation Organization number 1 in the Cedar Hills area. I'm Bruce Bartlett, the vice chair. Virginia Bruce, our venerable chair, is recuperating from some medical activity and has joined us, but I will be steering the ship, so to speak, tonight. I welcome you all to come. And since this is a land use meeting, I am going to take it upon myself to read the land acknowledgement statement, which is right there. We want to acknowledge the people on whose land we live, the Aftaala Kalapuyans, also known as the Tualatin Band of the Kalapuyans, the first inhabitants of Washington County. We are grateful for the land we are on, Kalapuya land. Signers of the Willamette Valley Treaty of 1855 were removed from their homelands to the Grand Ronde Indian Reservation. Today, their descendants are tribal members of the Grand Ronde and Siletz tribes, carrying on the traditions and cultures of their ancestors. We acknowledge and express gratitude for the ancestors of this place and recognize that we are here because of the sacrifices forced upon them. In remembering these communities, we honor their legacy, their lives, and their continuation in our community. Please reflect on the role government has played in the painful colonial history and reflect as well on the resilience and healing of the indigenous land and communities. Significantly, we would like to invite everyone to collaborate and work together with the tribes to take care of the land and the water and the people who inhabit these spaces. Thank you very much. So I would like to invite the Washington County Sheriff's Office to give us an update. Megan, are you ready?
Lighting in here will adjust shortly. There we go. Is Deputy Hart in person?
Do not see him in the list.
Okay, well, I can go ahead and start and do my little portion, and if he makes it, then you can feel free to ask questions at that point. So coming up on April 13th, we have our career open house. This is an opportunity to see the different parts of the sheriff's office and learn about all of the different career opportunities that there are. You can see different training methods, teams, and opportunities for career within law enforcement at this open house. They're going to have a lot of demonstrations, and you can connect with the special teams as well, including canines, crisis negotiation, and all of those different groups. So that is April 13th from 11 to 4 at the Public Safety Training Center. And I'll put links to all of this in the chat here in a moment. Also coming up, we have the Canine Trials, always a very popular event for the year. The Canine Trials is a family-friendly or family-free family event. And it's where all of the different canine units in the area will come and have a competition in search, agility, apprehension, all sorts of different things. And those are coming up on Saturday, May 18th from 10 to 1 p.m. at Hillsborough Stadium. Let's see, Deputy Hart just messaged me. Deputy Hart is trying to join the link right now. Okay, so he should be popping on momentarily. Okay, so then we've got, I believe I spoke to this group about it last time, but we are still we're still recruiting for search and rescue as well as reserve deputies. Search and rescue are those between the ages of 14 and 17. So if you know of anyone within that age range that might be interested, they, have some time away with the search and rescue group. It's like a camp. They learn all sorts of skills. But then they actually go out and they search for missing persons. They search for evidence. And it's just a really good opportunity for any of those 14 to 17-year-olds that want to maybe learn about law enforcement or just want to be involved in some way. And then reserve deputies, we are recruiting for that as well. Those are volunteer deputies that maybe just don't want to do full time, and they get the same level of training and go out on the road with our employee deputies, and they will do special events, assist the deputies on the road, all sorts of different needs, and they fill a lot of really important roles. So if either of those are of interest to you, I'll put more information in the chat. Last but not least is the deputy. Yeah, so Ellie H is in the attendees. That's going to be our deputy.
All right. I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
I am looking for the deputy, in
Here we are.
attendees. Is he?
He's there. He's just it's just slow moving. I don't think it's him. I think it's
Yeah.
yeah.
Zoom is taking its good sweet time.
Zoom is taking a while.
There we go.
All right, there we go. So with that, I am going to go ahead and share the calls for service map, and then I will let Deputy Hart take over and discuss anything he's seeing in the area, and then you can ask any questions that you have. So here's our calls for service map.
Deputy Hart, would you like to introduce us and walk us through the slide?
I'm sorry, I'm still trying to figure out Zoom here. Could you repeat that?
Could you repeat that?
They're wanting to know if you have comments on the calls for service map and what you're seeing in the area currently.
No, it looks pretty consistent with my experience so far. Largely a lot of the I mainly patrol the Bethany district, which is everything above Highway 26. But that looks pretty consistent. Does anyone have any questions regarding this?
Anybody in the attendees have a question for the sheriff's office? You can raise your hand if you do. And if you don't, we'll just move along. Thank you.
Okay. If anyone has any questions about anything, they can feel free to put it in the chat and we can go ahead and answer as well.
Okay, well, I think that wraps things up there. Thank you very much. We appreciate you showing up. And we'll move along to the Tualatin Hills Park and Rec District. Frank, are you ready to go? Or will you be?
Oh, did you?
Nicole,
Yeah, how are you?
good.
Great. Thanks for having me. I am my screen, get to see my fruit in the dining room. My I'm Nicole Paulson. I'm a liaison with Tualatin Hills Park and Recreation District, and I wanted to share a couple of updates for you, with you on Park District. We have the local option levy update, which I believe next month, Holly, and I think there'll be some presentations on the levy with any of the levies that are going to be on the ballot
That's
this
right.
May. And so I'll keep that very brief, but we do have a levy that will be going out, and it will preserve nearly 50 full-time positions. It will make sure that level of service and care with service at the parks, trash pickup is all maintained. I can put a link in the chat if anybody is interested in finding out more information. It would be a 5-year levy, and it's about an average about $152 a year that we're seeing for cost for that levy. So again, I'll let Holly speak to that next month in a little bit more detail. We've got summer registration coming up on Saturday, April 13th. And then for in-district residents, and Monday, April 15th for out-of-district residents. We've got spring break planning coming. Open swim times will be available during the week, including Sunset Swim Center. So you can check our website for any of those additional swim times. We have youth volunteers needed, coaches needed for different sports programs, and we're looking for junior lifeguards. That can all be found at our volunteer page on our website. And we also have a survey out right now for South Cooper Mountain Park naming survey. If you're not familiar with the South Cooper Mountain area, it's near Shoals Ferry Road and Roy Rogers. And we've got some parks and trails that are identified to be named. So again, I will throw that link in the chat. And then a little bit closer to your area, we've got safety improvements coming to the Waterhouse Trail. We are improving trail accessibility across that trail system by partnering with Washington County's Urban Road Maintenance District, and it will construct pedestrian crossings with curb ramps at Branbury, Laidlaw, Charlet, and Paisley. So that's a big improvement for the Waterhouse Trail system. And the construction for those is expected in mid to late this year, 2024. A couple events happening in your area. We've got the Holy Festival at Parivar Park on March 16th. That's this Saturday from 3:30 to 5 p.m. The Sunset Shamrock Splash at Sunset Swim Center also this Saturday from 1 to 4. And we've got spring egg hunts at Cedar Hills Recreation Center on March 30th. So those are all the updates that I have for you today. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Fran, what do you have?
I don't know if you mentioned the spring native plant sale.
We do have that. Thank you, Fran, for reminding me. We do have the spring native plant sale that is still underway, and it runs through April 12th through the 13th. And there is an order form, and so I'm happy to throw that link as well in the chat. There'll be a lot of links in the chat, but please pick whatever you feel drawn to.
Where does one pick up the plants that you order?
I believe it's at the Tualatin Hills Nature Park, but
Actually, that pickup location is full. So there are other locations. So if we go to the link for Sparrowhawk or that THPRD, they will tell you the other options where you can pick up the native plants.
Thank you, Fran. Yes, I will pop that Sparrowhawk native plants link in the chat.
All right, Nicole, thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a great one.
Thanks, you too. Okay, Let's see, and so, Tualatin Valley Fire and Rescue. Frank, are you ready to, fill us in?
Close. How about Tualatin Valley Water District? Will that work for you?
Oh, Valley Water, oh, yeah, I saw that.
No worries. We work very closely with our friends at the fire department, so no problem.
It's a crucial part of fighting fires.
Exactly, right? So, speaking of which, actually, I just have a couple minor updates. The first one being hydrant flushing, which is when we open fire hydrants for two reasons. One, it kind of cleans out the way that the pipes work and everything. And it just enhances water quality. But then the other thing, it also verifies that the fire hydrants are working correctly and that all the valves are working the way that we want them to. So we've actually finished the hydro flushing in your area just for now. So up in that area, we kind of work from the higher elevations down to the lower. So we will return there in about a month, but for now, you probably won't see as much hydrant flushing there as you might have seen in the past couple months. And then the only other thing that we have going on is, or at least for that might concern you, we have a meadow grass main replacement starting in about a month. So what that is we are replacing about 1,600 feet of large diameter water main east of 174th and south of West Union. So the replacement will take a few months to complete, and we'll actually start the outreach and letting people know what's going on in probably about 2 or 3 weeks. So it'll be a pretty large project, but as always, it's for the betterment of the water system, and we appreciate everybody's patience in advance. So those are the only major things we have going on. Are any questions that I can answer?
How is the progress of the Willamette River supply line going?
Oh, I'm glad you asked. It's actually going very well. Especially, I know you guys are kind of on the opposite side, but especially if you go along kind of Roy Rogers and in that area, you see lots of pipe being put in. So everything is on schedule. Pretty soon, I'm not sure exactly when, but within the next year, we are going to start a very major outreach effort, letting people know about possible changes to the chemistry in the water and what it might do to the pipes and stuff like that. So be on the lookout for that. We have a lot of, I'll say, really smart scientist people looking at it that know a lot more about it than I do. And they're gonna help us figure out what's gonna happen and then let people know. But yeah, everything is going well. Lots of construction. So.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
That wraps that up. Okay, very good. That is the sum total of our service provider updates. The fire department, the Tualatin Valley Fire and Rescue, shows up if they're not doing something. And so I would much rather have them doing something than coming here. So sort of thanks for fire and rescue. And it's interesting that 3/4 of the work of the fire and rescue department is not fire related, it's medical related. So they provide a very serious contribution to our welfare. With that, I don't know of any development applications or neighborhood meetings coming up. Virginia. You're alive.
Yeah, yes, I am. And I'm sitting out front waiting for John to pick me up. So that information is all in the March issue of the Cedar Mill News, which I don't have in front of me right now. So there are some interesting development stuff going on, including a presentation at the Beaverton Planning Commission for Peter Court for what's going in next to Starbucks. Everybody's going crazy trying to understand what's going in next to Starbucks, and we don't know, but you might be able to find out at that meeting. I think there's the report on a previous neighborhood meeting, which is the 29 lot development going on to Thompson, right adjacent to Findlay Elementary. There's a little wrap up of that and more. So if you want to put the link to Cedar Mill News, CPO News into the chat, you could do that.
I will do that.
I'll be fully online when I get home, but in the meantime, here I am.
Well, we appreciate your dogged, stalwart determination to do this, and thank you for publishing the news. I want to make a comment to the attendees that I know you don't have access to the chat, and so I will copy the chat information while the presentations are going along, and we'll put them on a share. I will share the screen of those at the end of the meeting so you can make notes. This is a subject that is being worked between the CPOs and the county right now to give you access to the chat.
I think they're okay with doing it, but we forgot to. It has to be done at the very beginning, and we'd have to restart the meeting if we were going to do it. So it's probably not worth it.
There's a legal issue that has not been resolved.
There is still?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, we won't go into that.
Right. But just if you're an attendee, not a panelist, it could be frustrating to hear that stuff is in the chat that you can't get to.
Yeah, I will post it on the CPO1 Facebook page as soon as I get it.
That's a good idea. Okay. This is the open mic. It's your CPO segment of the meeting. If anybody in the attendees has a subject you would like to bring up, you have a few minutes, literally a few minutes, to say your piece and see if there's anybody else who has an interest in contributing to whatever subject is on your mind. So if anybody in the attendees, there's Bob, Chris, Donald, Jim, Marietta, Owner, and Sheila, who are welcome to raise your hand and go from there. I am not seeing anybody, which then brings us to, was there Virginia?
So we started something called the Cedar Mill Community Club, and we are getting very close to organizing what I'm calling the cleanup squad, which will be an event listed on the Adopt One Block Facebook page and website, and then people can turn out at the selected day and time to help clean up our downtown. So if you're not a member of the Cedar Mill Community Club and you're not allergic to Facebook, please join our group.
Oh yeah, I seem to have volunteered to lead that effort and I somehow forgot to mention it. And since I don't want to do all the work, we don't have a day picked out for this yet. I imagine it will be sometime in April. And the goal is to go up and down Cornell Road from Sunset High School to basically Barnes Salzman and clean up and tidy up and just make our surroundings more beautiful to the best of our ability. So that's, you can look forward to that and get excited and get your work gloves and your work boots out and plan to join us. All right, anything else, Virginia? Okay. With that, we have a fascinating presentation from Ariana Scopioni on on habitat in the area, on beavers and frogs and all the things that go into creating our lived environment. So Ariana, there we are. So take it away.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me tonight. So my name is Ariana Scipioni, and I am a regional habitat biologist for the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. And I cover a huge district from Salem to the midpoint of the Cascades and the midpoint of the Coast Range, all the way up to the border with Washington. And I work mainly on land use issues. Habitat Division at ODF&W recently popped out from under Wildlife Division. And so it's been exciting to see there's new capacity in the state to work on urban wildlife issues. And I'm excited to present a little bit about our priority wildlife connectivity areas. And so let me just share my screen really quickly. So hopefully you're seeing, excuse me. Let's see, actually, what we're not seeing. Let me. There we go. Okay. Okay, so hopefully you are seeing a screen that says Priority Wildlife Connectivity Areas in Oregon, putting science into policy and practice. Could I get just a thumbs up to see that everyone can see that? Okay, it looks like Fran can see it. Now this is a presentation that.
Wait, sorry, Ariana.
yeah.
You're at
Yes.
the end of the slides. Yeah.
Oh, it's showing just the end. Okay.
Yeah. Now, there you go.
Okay. Interesting, because it's showing the first on a different side. Let's see. I don't know why it's not showing the. Well, you
you're
might
on the first
just.
slide now.
Yeah, and are you seeing the little tiles on the side? Not in presentation
If you
mode.
go down to the bottom, yeah, there you go.
Oh, there it is. There it's working now.
It takes a
Okay.
little while. There you go. Perfect.
Awesome. Okay, so this is a presentation that my colleague who developed priority wildlife connectivity areas, she is definitely to credit for the majority of these slides. I've edited them a little bit, but this is a statewide mapping project, and I'll just dive right in. So, as you know, wildlife need to move across the landscape, and I'm not seeing all the, oh, I see what's happening. Okay. So wildlife need to move across our neighborhoods by day and by night, and wildlife species like beavers and deer and frogs have to navigate numerous hazards, obvious hazards like roads and fences, and then more difficult and nuanced hazards like the distance between wetlands and between ponds. Connected habitat patches are so important for all species, and especially important for species that are small and have a really difficult time navigating things as simple as a curb or a road. Northern red-legged frogs are a species that I work with a lot, and they have to move from their upland habitat to breeding ponds annually. And it's a really difficult question to answer as we modify the landscape. And of course, you know, the best, most protective method would be to conserve everything, but we also need to understand that development is occurring regularly, and how can we advocate for connectivity for wildlife in the face of human landscape change? So as we modify our habitats, how can we keep wildlife in mind? This image is a picture of my colleagues out on Highway 30 at night doing mortality surveys for northern red-legged frogs. You can see in my colleague's hand, she's holding the bones of a northern red-legged frog that was attempting to cross Highway 30 at night to reach breeding ponds on the other side. You might have heard of the Harborton shuttle, where people actually go out in the winter at night from, you know, sundown until 1 or 2 a.m. and transport northern red-legged frogs across Highway 30. The majority of these frogs are not making it across, you know, a busy 4-lane highway. So in 2019, ODF&W partnered with several others to start on the Oregon Connectivity Assessment and Mapping Project, which is called OCAMP. We worked with some partners at Portland State and the Samara Group to develop a model to understand how we can approach and understand how wildlife move across the landscape. And we had over 100 individuals from different agencies who participated in reviewing the work. And it started off with selecting surrogate species. So they selected over 54 species to represent a diversity of taxa, movement types, dispersal capabilities, and sensitivity to anthropogenic threat. So once we selected those species, and when I say we, I mean my colleague Rachel Wheat and her colleagues at Samara Group and PSU, they use data to represent each species' habitat needs. And they reviewed it and they did a formal statistical validation on that permeability. And they modeled areas where more or less movement is expected across the landscape and then prioritize that. They identified the most important areas for each species, and then they compiled all of that and selected just the top 1% of all species, all of those 54 species priorities. And they used 40-acre hexagons to create a map. And this is the result. So these blue areas cover approximately 40% of the state. There are some areas that were excluded. If you can see, I know it's probably hard on the computer, but there's some light violet patches which were excluded, and those are areas that are already receiving the highest level of protection in our federal or state forests, reserves like Crater Lake and a few others. So these PWCAs, which is a little bit of a mouthful, represent the parts of Oregon that have the highest overall value. They're not species specific. And within urban areas, we've had to designate a few areas that are stepping stones. These are little patches, and you can see this is Southeast Portland. These little violet patches are areas of habitat that can help wildlife navigate these very densely developed areas. And you might have seen in the news a while back, there was an amazing find of a spotted owl at Tabor Park. We don't know how it got there, but it looked like it was a juvenile. And someone actually from Bird Alliance of Oregon worked with a member of the public to bring it in for rehabilitation and testing. And unfortunately, it did die, and it died from rodenticide. So someone had poisoned, you know, their mouse or rat population, and that spotted owl ate that and perished, which is really unfortunate. What we have done with OCAMP is develop a policy. So HB 2834 is the Wildlife Corridors and Safe Road Crossing Act, and we developed a Wildlife Corridor Action Plan. And we have developed specific recommendations for PWCAs, and we'll be reviewing and updating it every 5 years. There's a Oregon Wildlife Corridor Action Plan that encourages really how habitat management and other initiatives can be modified with wildlife in mind. And this is not a regulation. So if you notice an area of the map that has a priority wildlife connectivity area, it doesn't mean that we are stopping development. It just means that we are encouraging developers, restoration specialists, cities, counties to carefully consider how they can develop with wildlife in mind. So some of the practice of that is using our Oregon conservation strategy, the technical report for the priority wildlife connectivity areas. We've got an executive summary that's pretty easy to read. And we have an interactive web map, which is what you saw earlier. The web map identifies the majority land managers and has specific and unique recommended conservation actions for each hexagon. So when you click on the map, you can see that for some of them, we have identified different priorities, such as barrier removal. A good example of for a transportation mitigation priority wildlife connectivity area is Highway 30 at the base of Forest Park, where I showed that picture earlier of my colleagues out doing mortality surveys. We are putting an undercrossing under Highway 30 so that amphibians can move across the distance between their upland habitat and their breeding ponds on the other side. We can use it for recommending renewable energy, land use sightings, waterway plannings, and really it's a tool for understanding what are the best management practices for connectivity conservation. We're hoping that ODOT, counties, cities will select wildlife passage projects to improve wildlife connectivity, especially in areas where there's high collision. And looking forward, we are going to be, updating and changing this map as we get more information and ground truth. It is a model, but it's really important to remember that wildlife corridors really aren't sufficient for true connectivity. We need to work in locations that will have the greatest benefit for a wide diversity of species. So that is my priority wildlife connectivity area presentation. Feel free to email me with any questions. I'll stop sharing, and I am open to questions. And I see, Fran, you have your hand up.
Yes, and I don't know if it's possible to do a screen share from my screen.
It should be.
Bruce, okay.
It should be.
If everybody's okay with it. So just for the group's knowledge, so I've been, for the last 5 years, I've been working on the regional corridors and connectivity working group, developing a strategic action plan, which will be under the Intertwine Alliance, and it'll be published pretty soon in the next few months. And the idea, next step is to implement these actions that we're recommending that complement what Ariana is just talking about. Ariana, I have two questions for you. One is that when I look at the mapping, today I just had a meeting with the CCI, Significant Natural Resource Subcommittee, and people were asking for what does the whole Washington County mapping look like? Because I've been trying to introduce this idea to people to look at, what's the most important natural resource areas that we must protect. So let me do my screen share for a second, and I'll show you what my two things are. Okay, I just want to make sure I got it up. So if you go to the priority wildlife connectivity areas, what Ariana was just talking about, this interactive map. If I look at Washington County, it's hard to see you just barely see the outline of Washington County. It would be nice if we could, on this map, see the specifics to Washington County.
Yes.
Okay, and then, and so one of the things that we look at, for instance, are these corridors of connectivity. And what I've been, let me see if I can do it again. Let's see, one more thing. Let me show you what I've been using it for in the, is this the right one? Hang on, I'm hoping I got this right. No. Nope. What I was trying to do is I have a document that I've been using to describe, like, when we get to transportation, roads need to be put in, but where's the most critical area that we protect, no matter what happens? And so I have an example of how to utilize this map for that purpose. So if I can just find it, okay, here it is. Okay, so let me do a new share. And I'll finish this up. So in the Southwest Washington County, which is not CPO 1, but CPO 6, one of the problems is they're having conversations about a road going through here. And the problem is we're not looking at this massive tributary here. What are we going to do? Are we going to allow the UGB to push into this SNR area here? And what I did was I did another mapping, and you can see that it is on the regional, the priority wildlife connectivity area. So the point is, this is kind of a reaffirmation of what Ariana was saying, is this is an important connectivity area, and you can just look at it aerial view and you can tell. And so what we want to do is do the same kind of thing. Bruce, I can do the same thing with CPO 1 and map out not only the blue areas, which are the designated priority areas or whatever. There are also these little stepping stones that we have in CPO 1 that are part of the development, needs to not be going through those, because birds, for instance, need, being able to fly from one tree to another during migration. And by the way, Ariana mentioned the barriers. One of the other barriers is light pollution.
Yeah.
Light pollution is another thing. So when we have schools being put in, let's make sure that the school there's some kind of rules that they can't have the lights, those bright field lights on 7 days a week, 16 hours a day. So those are just some of these. So I really appreciate what you and Rachel have been doing, Ariana. And hopefully we can use this data more intensely to help our legislators and our planners and our developers.
Yes, yeah, and I think it's really important to remember that both light, noise, physical barriers like roads, they can be modified. We can adjust them, and we can create undercrossings, we can create overcrossings. These are all something, if we're putting in a new road, it's really critical to think about how wildlife are going to move across it, under it, or over it. There's a really some great undercrossing projects across the state that are gathering more information on how to make those more wildlife friendly. But just like a,
oh, sorry, could you put that in the chat? Because I've been trying for ages to get wildlife crossings when they rebuild roads and things like that, when they put in the water main road. But so far, every time I try to get a grant or whatever, they say, well, you have to have $1 million and all this sort of stuff. And I don't know how to get that together. So if you could put something in the chat, we can address it.
Yeah, and I see we've got someone on the line with ODOT. Maybe they, I'm not sure whether they're involved in that process at all. But grants, we have been successful in applying for grants. Hi, Stephanie. We have been successful in Southeastern Oregon to apply for transportation grants to get undercrossings built. And I just actually was out near Crabapple Creek, just past Old Cornelius Pass Road. And they are also looking at grants to put in an undercrossing under Highway 30 and the railroad, which will be a very big engineering project. But I think it's becoming more and more common, and this issue is definitely gaining more attention.
Okay, does that wrap up the presentation? Any questions from the attendees? Very good. Well, I can see where a follow-up to this presentation focusing on the wildlife corridors in CPO 1 would be a good follow-up. And Ariana, I know you and I are actually neighbors in CPO 1. So I think that we could put this idea into a future agenda topic, and we can kick it around over the back fence. And so any other comments that either you or Fran would like to make on this subject?
Oh, thanks for having me. If you do have any fish or wildlife questions or wildlife conflict issues, I can also connect you with our district wildlife biologists or our fish biologists. And I'm happy to answer any. I know Virginia did put that in the description that we could talk about wildlife conflict, and maybe we can save that towards the end after their, other presentations are done. But yeah, if you have a flicker pounding on your chimney or a raccoon that just won't leave you alone, feel free. I used to work mainly on human wildlife conflict.
I do have one question that occurred to me. I saw that you had the Natural Resource Conservation Service of the USDA up, and you mentioned soil and water conservation districts. So can you just talk for a moment about your collaboration with NRCS and the unpronounceable TSWCD, the Tualatin Soil and Water Conservation District? Unfortunate, almost as bad as Tualatin Hills Park and Recreation District acronym.
Yes.
So what kind of collaboration do you engage in?
So some of my colleagues actually do a bit more work with NRCS than I do, but we do collaborate with their new beaver biologist. So they have a beaver conflict resolution biologist at NRCS, and she works on private land and also public land. And beavers are such a hot topic these days. They're getting, I think, a little bit of the recognition that they deserve as a keystone species. We are working with Tualatin Soil and Water Conservation District on a beaver emphasis area, but it's actually out a little bit further outside of our CPO. It's in Gales Creek. To better understand how beaver are moving across the landscape and really get better numbers on abundance and presence in that watershed. We have a new action plan for beavers across the state. And so we've been working a lot with different soil and water conservation districts and the Wetland Conservancy and just a handful of nonprofits who work on conservation to better understand the state of beaver. It's a species that was extirpated in the early 1900s from, trapping, and over 100 million beaver used to exist across the United States, and we have much reduced numbers, but we're hoping to increase those numbers, especially in the North Willamette watershed, which is the 7-county district that I work within.
Well, that certainly sounds like a fascinating subject, considering this is the beaver. Isn't this the beaver state? Isn't that our?
It is. It's our.
Well, it would be a testament to civilization if we didn't kill them all.
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Ariana, and good luck in your endeavors.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. And I'll stick around for a little while if you guys have any questions that come to mind. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Well, I think we're going to move on from wildlife to talking about their primary nemesis, which would be transportation. I think, Stephanie, I think you have the leadoff position on the West Side Multimodal Transportation Study, which is a segue into basically all things transportation, but in particular, the multimodal study that has it, so give us an update. Has it been completed or where are we at in that study?
Hi there. Thank you for having us. I believe Dawn was going to start off and do a little context setting
Oh,
about where this all began. Dawn, did you want to start?
you're seeing volunteer work here in progress. I mean, this is not being done by paid people. All the CPO leaders are donate their time. We're community builders who donate our time. And I don't know, Don, we're sort of giving you kind of a abrupt introduction. Don had been out in Banks at the city council meeting, and he's somewhere between Banks and his home.
Okay. Well, we're a little earlier on the agenda than we were planned, so he may not be ready yet. We can go ahead and go first, and then he can come in when he's ready.
Okay, just as a preface to this, there was a transportation service study that was done, I think, in 2017 that set the stage for subsequent analysis and studies. And one of those is the West Side Multimodal study. It's important to know that transportation planning has a 20-year horizon. So by the time a transportation project comes up, it's generally been studied for several decades. So it's difficult to change things at a late date. And so with that, here is Stephanie, take it away.
Great. Kate's actually going to start us out. This screen sharing is a little odd. Are you seeing both the slides and my notes?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Does anyone know how to fix that?
I would unshare, Stephanie, and then when you go to share, you get to select which screen.
Well, I think it's all one slide, though. It's all one.
No, you enable slideshow in PowerPoint. The up at the top, not the PowerPoint menu, but the one that's above that, and it should say start slideshow.
Okay. From beginning, let's see if that does it. Still giving me the full thing, so I'm afraid we'll have to put up with that.
If you go down to the bottom and there's that little oh,
There you got it.
Got it.
Got it?
Got
Okay,
it.
great.
Yay!
All right, I'll start us off. Hi, everyone, and good evening. Thank you for having us here tonight. My name is Kate Hawkins. I'm a senior transportation planner with Metro, the regional government here in the Portland metro area, and I'm joined by Stephanie Millar, principal planner from ODOT. And tonight we're going to talk to you about the West Side Multimodal Improvement Study, give you an update on the work that's been completed to date, current status, and next steps moving forward. Next slide.
I'm trying. Oops, now it did too. Okay, there we go.
All right, so I'm going to start out with a little bit of context. So back in 2019, the governor's office under Kate Brown asked ODOT to study conditions and needs on the Sunset Highway, or US 26, and evaluate actions that ODOT and regional partners can take to build a multimodal system that works for all users who rely on it. And ODOT and Metro are managing this study together. It centers on the US 26 highway, as you can see here, between Hillsborough and the Vista Ridge Tunnel in Portland. And the study looked at all types of investments and improvements, some of which do extend beyond these study boundaries, but this dotted line is generally the study area that we were looking at. The study kicked off in January of 2022 and is expected to conclude in the first quarter of this year. So we're near the final steps of wrapping up. And then these are all the partners that are working together on this study and that are represented on our steering committee. So ODOT and Metro are partnering with a number of local jurisdictions, businesses, and community-based organizations to help guide the study's progress. And on our steering committee, we have a number of elected officials and agency managers from partner agencies listed here, many of which own and operate transportation infrastructure within the study area. And additionally, we have 2 business representatives from Greater Portland Inc. and the Washington County Chamber of Commerce, and 2 community-based organization representatives from Apano and Centro Cultural. So this committee provides guidance to project staff, and ultimately the committee is providing a final recommendation that will go in the final report into a implementation strategy that they recommend. These are the issues and needs in the corridor that were agreed to by the partner agencies, staff, and steering committee members working on the project. They build on past reports and planning exercises and were refined by all of our partners. And so, as you can see here, the identified issues and needs that kind of guide the study are transit travel times, last mile connections, safety, commitment to climate and economic prosperity, and freight mobility, to name a few. And then now I'm going to kind of jump to how we evaluated a number of potential improvements to address the problems we're seeing in the study area. We grouped investment options into a series of scenarios for comparison purposes. And they're grouped here ranging from kind of more easy to implement to more complicated and more costly. And so these start out with scenario 1, which looks at system management improvements, things like transit subsidies, carpooling, van pooling, improvements to the bike and pedestrian networks in the region, etc. And then we also modeled shorter term improvements, things like park and rides and minor modifications to interchanges. And then scenario 3 looks at existing infrastructure improvements. Excuse me. So this included widening Cornelius Pass Road between US 26 to Highway 30, widening US 26, adding a carpool lane there and some overcrossing improvements. Scenario 4 scales up even more with new infrastructure improvements such as a new max tunnel under the Willamette River, a new northern connector concept that would provide a new arterial route between 26 and Highway 30 and a new North Willamette Bridge. And then finally, the 5th scenario looked at tolling on 26. And I'll note that the scenarios here are cumulative, or at least scenarios 1 through 4 are cumulative. So each one includes all the improvements and projects in the scenario before, except for tolling, which was looked at as a standalone improvement. And now I will pass it to Stephanie.
Great, thank you, Kate. We started with the 2045 Regional Transportation Plan, which features the newly adopted 2023 Regional Transportation Plan as its baseline. So everything in the fiscally constrained plan that we would expect to see is already accounted for in there. And between today and 2045, we're anticipating that we'll have a population growth of about 30% in the metro area and job growth of about 37%. The assumptions in this baseline include about $68.5 billion worth of transportation investments. And between today and 2045, we would expect the travel time between the one end of the study area to the other, that is Hillsborough to the end of the Vista Ridge Tunnel, to increase by about 8 to 13%. And get it to go to the next slide. There we go. So in scenario one, we used methods that you can use to enhance the existing system. So a lot of transportation demand management and attempting to increase transit, provide some subsidies, do things kind of around the edges that could help with improving the travel times. And what we see here is that we're not gaining a lot of improvement over the 2045 scenario. So you see a little tiny bit of improvement. You get about a 1% reduction. So you're going from 8 to 13% change to 7 to 13% change. In scenario two, we looked at near-term improvements and spot fixes and explored strategic interchange modifications, new auxiliary lanes, and those are those little slip lanes between an exit and an on-ramp to kind of smooth the transition, new park and ride lots, new transit routes, some things like that. And once again, what we see is a modest improvement in travel times. So here we're gaining over the 2045 numbers, about a 2% improvement overall. And in scenario three, we focused on parallel routes and local facilities. So here we considered larger and more complex projects, looked at widening Cornelius Pass Road and parts of Barnes and Burnside, some new arterial crossings over 26 to help the local network function better, couple of small new roads, and then we also looked at a managed lane to help with the freight mobility, since that was one of the drivers of the request to do the study in the first place. So we had one lane on US 26 that we tested as converted to high occupancy vehicles, so carpool and freight only. And what we saw when we did this was we actually lost improvement. So we ended up adding travel time. That was something to keep in mind as we look at the next phases of follow-up work. In scenario four, we looked at major large-scale infrastructure, and these largely grew out of previous work that has been done and studied, including things like the corridor bottleneck study has looked at things that could be done to interchanges on 405 and 26 to help improve that area, and some concepts like putting the MAX in a tunnel under downtown, very costly, but it would very much improve travel time. And then two concepts that came out of the Washington County Future Study, which Dawn will talk a little bit about in a minute. And those were the Northern Connector and a new bridge over the Willamette from US 30 to the Airport Industrial District. Here we see that we did gain some time. So we saw some improvement over the losses that we're going to see between today and 2045. So we're almost back to that baseline in some ways. But the costs are high and there's a lot of barriers to doing that. So as we mentioned before, the first scenarios 1 through 4 are all cumulative, and they build on each other. So they all assume the 2045 baseline, and then each one of those adds onto each other. Then we looked at tolling alone without those other improvements because we wanted to see what it would do in this area. Tolling has two functions. It can be used as a revenue generation source to help pay for infrastructure improvements, and it can also be used as a travel demand management tool to encourage people to consolidate their trips, share their trips with another person, or take another mode, or delay their trips to a time that's less congested. So when we modeled the tolling, we saw a pretty dramatic improvement in travel time. Let's see. And that assumed that all vehicles on US 26 between Brookwood and the Vista Ridge Tunnel would face a base toll. And then there were a couple of points where we had some additional congestion tolls during high peak times. Okay, so the steering committee and the project management group took in all this information, and it was really data rich and interesting, and came to a consensus that the multimodal investments that we saw, particularly in scenarios 1 and 2, were things that we could really get behind and support as a group, and they asked to move those forward. The things in 3, 4, and 5 took a lot more talking and conversation, and the committee reached a consensus to study strategic capital investments and a funding strategy by looking at tolling compared with some complementary corridor investments. They also decided that the Northern Connector and North Willamette Bridge would not move forward at this time and could be considered at a future date if these other strategies didn't pan out. So right now we are circulating the final draft recommendation to the steering committee and confirming that we accurately portrayed what they said. And we're seeking endorsement from the steering committee members and participating agencies.
Well, that is a lot of work.
Did I successfully stop sharing? I can't find you.
Yeah, no, we're good. We're back to normal. And so to circle back around to the transportation, I've lost the name of it. Don, why don't you take us back to the beginning of how this current effort started?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Given that I'm running off of one monitor, would you be able to pull up my slide deck? And
yes,
that would be fabulous. I've gotten spoiled by having two complementary monitors and lost some of my technological skills. So good evening all. First, a quick introduction. So my name's Don Odermatt. I've had a pretty lengthy history in transportation in the area. Just retired from the city of Hillsborough after 28 years, retired as the transportation director. Part of my career in public service started as the project engineer on the extension of the light rail into Hillsborough. So I've had a long history of working multimodally. My roots actually are in the private sector, and I was kind of a rare government worker who actually had negotiated the ability to continue to do consulting, not in conflict with Hillsborough through my years. And so for many of you up in the CPO, many of you may have heard my name before. I've been the transportation engineer for the Peter Court family, J. Peter Court and Company, dating back to before light rail even built Sunset Transit Center. So I think I'm at about year 30. I've had the pleasure of helping the city of Hillsborough in a number of ways, one of which is this transportation future study. And then most recently supporting Matt Delata, who's the new transportation director for Hillsborough, in bringing Hillsborough's voice to this study that Kate and Stephanie just did a terrific job of presenting. So transportation future study, what is it? So it's a study that was funded by the legislature with a $1.5 million grant. granted by the legislature back in 2013. So why did we do this? Could I have you hit the next slide, please? So at that point in time, the region as a whole was going through a process. Bruce, if you could toggle the slide, please.
I'm working on it.
Okay. There was a process that Portland region had had a history, and particularly the west side, of growing faster than the 20-year mandated land supply for housing and employment. Legislature had set up a framework by which the Portland region could establish a 50-year reserve for urban and rural growth. Personally, I'm a farmer, so I recognize the value of being able to plan my rural investments with some certitude. And so same thing with the urban side. We had areas within Hillsborough that utilities went in undersized because we filled up in 5 years what was supposed to take 20. And so this created a path of opportunity to do better, planning for not only public infrastructure, but private investment. As we started doing some modeling of this, we were seeing a lot of pressure on the transportation system, well beyond what we planned for in our mandatory 20-year system plans. That led us to engage with the legislature, and it resulted in the funding for this future study. So I'm going to take you through at a high level that study. It was a multi-year process, a lot of public involvement involved in it. Bruce, if you could toggle the slide, please. So anytime you start looking out into the future, I forgot this slide's got, go ahead and click for you. It brings up a couple of tables, including the growth of the west side region. But yeah, thank you. So the objective of the study was to evaluate the long-term transportation strategies and investments needed to sustain the county's economic health and quality of life in the coming decades. Again, Hillsborough was the original champions, but we made it clear this was a broader issue than Hillsborough. Washington County led and delivered the study. Next slide, please. When you get into forecasting growth that far out, the ability to understand its, I think you skipped over one.
I did.
Thank you. The ability to predict, what the growth will be at both in housing and employment lacks certitude. And so we looked at a range. Scenario one is really kind of a midline projection. As you can imagine, anytime we look at population employment forecasts, there's a range. So scenario one was kind of midline. Scenario two is kind of at the upper end of the bracket. What does that look like? 41% increase in population, spanning up to 55% increase. Employment, 100% increase to 140% increase. And as you can imagine, that puts a lot of pressure on the system. We're doing that within a constrained geography. So again, this study was done after House Bill 4078 trimmed out some of the expansion area in northwestern Hillsborough. So we're testing the urban reserves as they presently have been adopted. Densities clearly go up from today's densities to 32%, more people per square mile, up to 45%. So everything's densifying to keep us from pushing the edges out into the precious farmland. Next slide, please. As you can imagine, Washington County, most of its mobility demand is to and from the east. Some major markers of growth here. We're looking at imported traffic coming in from the east, generally Multnomah County, Clark County, Clackamas County, growing by about 43%. Exported workforce, about 32% going the other way. A 72% increase in mobility just within the county. So a lot of transportation pressure. So go ahead and toggle the slide. We looked at looking at these two scenarios of growth through the lens of three investment packages, very similar to what you saw in Kate and Stephanie's presentation. We started by looking at what if we keep doing what we've been doing? And that would be similar to that scenario one, what's been our path forward, multimodal investments, nothing real bold and broad in the road sector. High capacity transit's clearly part of the vision. We looked at scenario two, or B, was basically starting to look at expansion of some of the roads in a more modest arterial type of construct. And then scenario three started getting into more of a higher capacity roadway approach. It's important to understand that in the background of this was the West Side bypass. A lot of folks in the public were saying, what about, where is it? Is it time? And so particularly scenario C started to look at some of that and started answering some questions. So next slide, please. Do a quick time check here. Looks like we're doing fine. So one of the things that we felt was important was that we really wanted to model that we've accomplished the things that we all hold dear, which is a walkable system. So we really assumed that the entire system had sidewalks throughout. It had good quality, low stress bicycling networks. We're, frankly, depending on the locale, the jurisdiction, either a long ways from that or getting close to it. We've been blessed in Hillsborough with being closer than most, but that was a foundational assumption. We wanted to try to maximize the amount of mobility that can occur without an automobile. And so toggle the next slide, please. We looked at really some visionary transit growth. We looked at an extension of high capacity transit on TV Highway, its ultimate extension continuing down Oregon 10 into Barbara. We had the Southwest Corridor Light Rail. We had high capacity transit in the form of Bus Express coming out the Sunset Highway Corridor. Again, some of these ideas you saw reflected in Kate and Stephanie's modeling scenarios. Extension of the light rail, Blue Line out to Forest Grove. Next slide, please. When we talk about some of the road improvements, again, you see some of these were picked up and studied in depth in the study that was just presented. Back at this point in time, Cornelius Pass Road was still in the hands of Washington County and Multnomah County. Subsequent to that, kind of recognizing its role in the economic success of the state, where we have so much of the high-tech industry is moving its freight on it as 26 gets congested. The legislature directed ODOT to take that on as the new state highway 127. Interchange improvements, again, looked at in this recent study, improvements on the Barnes-Burnside corridor. If you go back to the old Lutrac study in the mid-90s, that corridor, in exchange for building a West Side Freeway, was slated to go to 5 lanes. So that's clearly not very practical, as was kind of reinforced in the outcomes of the study that is just wrapping up. We looked at, you see in the north-south direction, some enhancements of north-south mobility, particularly that dashed red line that you see coming up the west side of the growth area. That was really looked at as kind of a limited access connection or extension of Cornelius Pass Road. South Hillsborough has been delivering a portion of that. Washington County's been working on that concept as well, with some of their extensions down in Tile Flat Road and so forth. Next slide, please. The throughways, that's where things got, really kind of focused in terms of, would a West Side Freeway make a big difference? The bottom line was that we found that the ability to have like a freeway type of improvement connecting from down on 99W South Sherwood all the way up to Sunset Highway, kind of beltlining around the west side of Hillsborough, didn't solve a lot of the internal problems that we see on 217 and a lot of the north-south arterials. High expense, high, environmental impact. Long story short, it really became kind of the demise of the the vision of the West Side Bypass. We really galvanized around the limited access north-south mobility. More to the topic of this evening, you'll see the dashed red line and blue line up at the north end. So this is where that concept that came out of that public engagement process known as the Northern Connector, which is really some enhancements to Cornelius Pass Road. As I like to say, you turn the corner on the Germantown, basically widening that corridor, and then really recognizing the environmental impacts, the value of Forest Park, just frankly, the engineering challenges of the terrain, the idea of doing a tunnel that would go underneath the West Hills. The team knew for many, many decades there's been a planned North Bridge that would cross over the Willamette, allow traffic to detour and not have to pass through the heart of St. John's. And so this concept knitted together the tunnel with the bridge. And obviously you saw in Kate and Stephanie's presentation that that's been tested. It was part of that package number 4. Go ahead and toggle the slide. When we looked at these packages, quite a bit more demand. We moved the needle a lot, but not as much as one would hope. Kind of on the right side, table 7.3, you see that non-auto mode shifted, grew from about 11 to 15%. And really the more dense urban areas grew from 9 to 14. So, more value there, but across the spectrum of countywide mobility, too modest of a change to really make the difference that we were hoping for. When we look at the 3 packages, vehicle trips grow by a fairly modest amount. 2 million trips today, it's about a 50% increase. Not a lot of movement in vehicle trip capacity change between those 3 investment packages we talked about. Transit is where we saw a huge upside. And so the city's been working with the county and TriMet to really start looking to grow the transit resources within this county, we saw a greater than threefold growth opportunity. Walk and bike, again, substantial change in mobility. Next slide, please. But, you know, we as consumers of mobility, a lot of what we feel is the delay. We feel that congestion, and you can see benchmarked here in 2010 on the left, vehicle hours of delay, on the right, truck vehicle hours of delay. Pretty significant increases, more than doubling the delay that we experience today. You can see that as we got more and more bold, and of course the price tag bigger and bigger, we start, you know, chomping at that delay a bit, particularly the movement benefiting truck delay. But again, that was with, you know, some major freeway type investments. And again, the Northern Connector really truly is more of an arterial, but it was handled as really kind of a throughway label in this particular study. Next slide, please. So honing in a little bit more on this Northern Connector, what was found through that study reduces traffic on the adjacent roads by about 50%, reduces truck traffic by about 60% on Sunset Highway, improved mobility. One of the key objectives of the steering committee of the study was system redundancy. Very much an awareness that if there's an incident on 26, you're trapped. There's not a lot of options. That's difficult both for commuters, but it's also extremely difficult for high value freight that is time sensitive in trying to make connections, whether those are connections flying freight out of PDX or simply making connections. A lot of the high tech freight microchips are actually trucking across the region, aggregating into triple trailers heading north and south on I-5 to the larger airports that have more international flight connections. So PDX is actually about the number 5 airport for shipping that stuff out. Huge economic opportunity to try to, you know, enhance mobility. The businesses, with my Hillsborough director hat on, a lot of conversations with businesses looking to continue to invest and grow the mobility of workforce, but more particularly timely freight is a significant investment decision for them. So this Northern Connector at the time was looked at about a $2.5 billion project, possibility for a public-private partnership. That's what a P3 is. It's really been recognized as knowing that there's not surplus federal funds that flow through our Portland region. Most of what we have we use for transit. This really sets up with a tunnel and a bridge as an opportunity for a tolled facility. I think culturally folks are more accepting of tolling when they, you know, see a new facility that they're effectively buying with that toll. And obviously the timing of this evening on the heels of the governor's announcement regarding tolling statewide Portland region was an interesting juxtaposition of timing. Next slide, please. So what does it look like? Basically a 2-tube tunnel, 4 lanes, 2 each direction, crossing underneath the West Hills. Because of those of you that have driven Highway 30 know, if you think about the St. John's Bridge, the terrain there, you've got the river channel with its shipping height. You've got freight rail immediately next to Oregon 30. So this would be envisioned as coming out at an elevated intersection, very similar to St. John's Bridge and how Germantown comes out. So basically, a couple of comparisons. The tunnel length, about the same length as the light rail tunnel. The bridge length, it'd be about 0.9 miles long. Markham Bridge, by comparison, is 1.4 miles long. St. John's Bridge, just slightly shorter, 0.7 miles. So these are types of facilities that this region has been able to deliver economically. Obviously, the price tags have gone up quite a bit since this study was done, just with the impacts of inflation is really launching the cost of infrastructure markedly. Next slide, please. I'm just about wrapped up.
Is there another slide?
Nope, I think that was the last one. So anyway, following the study, there was some additional work that was commissioned by the port, Intel, cities, counties. We did a Washington County freight study. What it basically identified is that we've been doing a good job and will continue to do a good job of moving freight within Washington County, but it really highlighted the challenge of mobility for freight getting in and out of the county. So that's the combination of Sunset Highway, Cornelius Pass Road, but also South County down in I-5. Sunset Highway, as we looked at the regional transportation plans and the outcome of this study, really continued to be a problem without a solution. And so that's ultimately led the awarding of the funding for this study, as I think was probably introduced by Stephanie and Kate. Number of the businesses, Genentech, the leader, had gone to the governor saying, hey, if you want us to keep investing here, we need to see some future, some opportunity to understand what mobility is going to look like, time-sensitive cancer drugs that are life-saving. What are we going to do? Governor gave ODOT and Metro $1 million. City of Hillsborough, Washington County each chipped in 100,000. Jointly led. I thought the ladies did a great job of presenting that today. Great partnership of public and private around the table on that. And with that, I had intended to present this as an opening for their presentation. I'm double dipping tonight. I just got done presenting at the City Council for the City of Banks. So my apologies to all of you. And I'd be happy to field any questions. And I see Virginia has her hands up.
Go for it, Virginia.
Rail. Where does freight rail come into all of this? I know my mother used to tell me about how Los Angeles had a great transit system, and then General Motors came in and killed it because they wanted everybody to drive cars. And it seems like a good deal of all of that could go on existing. I know, it would be very expensive to buy up right-of-way for new rail, but it does seem to me like some of what is shipped out of Washington County and even shipped into Washington County could go on the railroad. And I mean, I may be completely crazy, but
yeah, the railroad's clearly an efficient way to move, particularly high weight, high bulk freight. When we think about the industries, that really drive the economy, certainly in this state, the heart of that's the high tech. You're talking about extremely high value freight. It's fairly low weight, but it's very time sensitive. A lot of the microchips are, under contract to get into computers and equipment that are being, manufactured and assembled elsewhere around the world. And so one of the things, there was a high tech commodity study that was done also back in this time frame that really did a deep dive study, really highlighted the time sensitivity of freight mobility. One of the outcomes that came through this was, for the first time ever, we've had some flights that are, it's very expensive, but flying some time sensitive freight out of Hillsborough Airport up and over the hill and landing at PDX and then cross deck transferring. The last I heard, that flight had been canceled. I had been waiting for an update from Genentech. I haven't heard that yet. But, again, you're not talking about anywhere near the capacity to be able to speak to the true needs of mobility. But by and large, shipping on heavy rail is slow. And so it certainly has a place, but it really is not the right tool for a lot of the time-sensitive materials.
I'm talking about getting it out of here to PDX, just to get them off the freeway.
Are you thinking about, so the light rail has been talked about, but again, the issues of security, cost.
There's a railroad that runs right through Beaverton.
Yeah, again, freight rail does not move things fast enough. That's the heart of the problem.
I'm not saying to ship it all the way. I'm saying to ship it from here to the airport.
That's what I'm saying too. The ability to move those trains through. No.
I mean, in rush hour, you'd think it would be.
And there's business decisions that these businesses are making about how often they want to have to pack up and move that freight, and how many times they have to touch it. So there's a lot of factors that go in, and that's really a decision that the businesses are making.
Yep. Believe me, if it made sense, it'd be getting done. Fran, go ahead. I apologize. Virginia, I don't want to step on your toes. This is your CPO. So.
By the way, Don, I would really love to get your email. Been working on transportation issues and as well as significant natural resources for a long time here in Washington County. And my very first exposure to CCI was learning from some of the farmers out in the west part of our county who were talking about getting their blueberries to the airport to meet the flight. that was really critical because if they miss it by a few minutes, it's really, devastating for them. And a large number of our blueberries actually do exit the state.
Mhm.
So it was actually my first learnings was that's the beauty of CCI is we learn from other CPOs about what their priorities are. And I think that's another example, not just the technology people, but a lot of our farmers, few minutes or an hour in the day is a huge problem. So I agree with
Yeah.
you, Virginia, that it'd be great if we could send it by train, but they weren't even interested in that.
It's interesting in that high-tech commodities study, we all learned a lot. There's a lot of information out there. The blueberry crop was actually identified as a complementary crop to microchips. Why? A lot of the blueberries fly out internationally. They're heading to Southeast Asia. And so not only is it the time sensitivity of getting blueberries to PDX, but the more freight that can be driven, flown out through PDX, the more market attractiveness for direct international flights out of PDX. Again, right now, most of our microchips are flying out of SeaTac, Vancouver, BC, LAX, and San Francisco, with PDX being number 5. So being able to grow the market, grow the number of international flights has multiple benefits. But yeah, you got to get that freight to PDX in the first place.
Fran, I will connect you and Don outside of the meeting. Well, this has been kind of a barn burner of a subject. I think that we won't have any further thing to say until Metro has reviewed the plan and we know what the region's next steps are going to be. Am I capturing it correctly?
One of the things I think strategically and logistically spot on with Kate and Stephanie's message, be aware that behind the scenes, many of us are working with legislators, trying to find additional funding to start taking those next steps. What we don't want to have happen ideally is to have this great study sit on a shelf. The businesses are expecting more of that, the communities are as well. And so it takes money. We've accomplished a lot here for 1.2 million. But we have to go a lot deeper. Those tend to be more expensive studies than this higher level work. So we're trying to really find folks with checkbooks that can put behind that effort.
That's what it comes down to. Kate and Stephanie, do you have any closing remarks?
Just thank you for having us, and we'll keep you posted as things progress.
Thanks
Right,
everyone
thank
for your
you very
time.
much. We appreciate Go ahead.
I just want to say thanks to Don, because he was the one who suggested this topic for CPO1. Transit and transportation is so complicated. Sometimes I just, blah, 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 because I can't understand it and I don't see any good outcomes. But John said, we can do this, and the right people jumped on board, and I really appreciate it. And basically the same thing happened with our the first part of the program when Ariana said, we'd really like to present, and Fran jumped on, and boy, we got a good program. CPO1 is known for good programs.
So Fran, you seem to have gotten into both topics tonight. You have some comments?
Yes, I would think this would be a great presentation for CPO6. That's the Cooper Mountain, the southwest portion of Washington County. I heard a couple of assumptions tonight that the latest I know of are not correct, but this is why I think it would be good to have that interaction with those people in that area. And
there's a lot that's been happening down there, as Fran, you're right in noting a lot of discussions about some of those investments that I touched about. Yeah,
I'm intimately familiar. But also one of the things I was going to ask too, Kate and Stephanie, if you looked at, I saw that you had, Don spoke to the express transit, and those express buses going from one place to another. And I know Diami Valentine from LUT is talking about not so much carpooling as maybe a form of, I'm going to call it rideshare, shuttle buses. So smaller vans taking people, groups of people to and from work. I do know that the last mile is a real big issue for the people working at, let's say, Intel or some of the other places where the transit just stops and, over a mile away from their work. And they can't, in the winter, it's really hard to walk that extra mile when you're already working 10 hours a day in both directions. So I'm glad to see that Don and that you approached that topic of last mile, because that's what often causes people to get into their cars.
Yes, we did coordinate with Washington County and their recent transportation futures study. Was that what it's called? The new transit study that they just completed.
Yeah, the Washington County Transit Study.
Washington
Yeah,
County
the transit one as opposed to, yeah. And so
Yeah,
I have some maps with circles all around them where we have big holes. So that's why I wanted to speak with you about it and see whether
yes, and that was one of the things that the steering committee asked us to endorse as something to support in moving forward.
A lot of moving pieces to move people and stuff around. So thank you all very much. We have two more subjects tonight. And if you'll beg my pardon, that we have a local issue, but we have Hal Nguyen from TriMet here, who would like to say a few things about did she
Let him go first. I think he needs
because TriMet is transportation. I would like to finish the transportation stuff before we
ask him if he's okay to stay.
Ish. So Hal.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, what is it? I'm sorry, I missed the last part. Yeah,
Well,
sorry.
we're providing some time so you can share the subject of that you wanted to.
I don't so much have a subject. I'm more of like being here, being the voice of the ears, the eyes, the voice of the communities. So like whoever or anybody here has any question, then I'll take those questions. If I don't, like I'll try my best to answer it, but if I don't know the answer to it, I'll find the appropriate person to get that answer to the whoever is asking. And then I'm also taking comments, concerns, or anything. So I'm literally just being an active listener.
Very good.
I don't have anything to present or I don't have an agenda.
And so the subject of your that you're interested in is regarding TriMet services.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
So you would like to have any questions regarding TriMet services?
Not just questions, comments, concerns. Yes, anything TriMet related, to me.
Okay.
Yep. And
Brandon, we have a member that has her hand up.
Yeah.
Okay.
How is it possible? Is it okay with you to put your contact information in the chat, because not everybody remembers it right here and might want to ask you later.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you.
Virginia?
Hi, I jumped onto the TriMet Riders Club newsletter. Or I think that's what it's called. And I'm constantly seeing delays, closed elevators, delayed service due to operator shortage, which is, that's kind of the bugaboo of all public agencies. But this goes out and that goes out. And if I had a job where I had to be to work at a certain time, I'm not sure I'd even consider TriMet. Why? Am I just seeing them because it's a big complicated system? And all I'm seeing is stuff with maps. I'm not even seeing anything about buses. So is it a matter of priorities? Is it a matter of funding?
Yeah, so what it is you're seeing is the daily updates.
Yeah.
Yes. So it is to
and up to the minute.
So it is to inform folks it's not so much addressing like the bigger problem. It's just letting you know, hey, there is a delay.
I know, but like I said, if I had to be in East Portland every day at 8 a.m., I'd have to get on the train at 6 just to make sure there wasn't some kind of a hoo-ha.
I appreciate the concern that you're bringing up. I will note it down, and then I'll give it up to higher up, and I'll make sure your voice is heard.
Thank you. Fortunately, I don't have to commute more than just walking up my stairs inside my house, but it would be very discouraging if I did.
So how, I think that CPO 1 will put together an agenda topic dealing with a TriMet and invite you back.
Yes, I will look at my schedule, and then we can talk some more and we can connect on more, and then I would love to get that list from you.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much. On to our final subject, we have a new senior housing facility being created in Cedar Mill. It's pretty much built and painted, and it looks like people are ready to almost start moving in. We have Richard Squan here to tell us about the new senior facility, which is increasingly interesting to us seniors.
Yeah, hello. My name is Paul Richards Kwan. I'm the pastor of Christ United Methodist Church. So in 2022, we started building what is now called the Opal, right there at the corner of Dogwood and Saltzman, which is right behind the Target in Cedar Mill. And so what the Opal will be is 54 units of affordable housing. The vast majority, or most of it, will be a 1-bedroom unit with a few 2-bedroom units. And it will serve people in the 0 to 60% AMI area median income range, with some of the units serving at 0 to 30%. So low income to very low income affordable units. As the church was exploring this and in conversations with nonprofit partners and exploring developers to work with, we really we're a church that is LGBTQ affirming, and we're looking at the concern that elders sometimes need to go back into the closet if they are going to be able to be in affordable housing or in senior living situations. And so in order to create a safe place that was affordable for seniors, we wanted to create services that were specific for LGBTQ seniors. So the service provider will be Friendly House. They have their elder pride services. A portion of their work is focused on LGBTQ seniors, and so they will have resident services specifically for LGBTQ seniors. The first residents should be moving in the first week of April, and we will have a big celebration with hopefully the governor, fingers crossed, second week of April. So we are excited. We hope that by June we'll have full occupancy. And we're working as a congregation to welcome them well. We are providing quilts for every resident when they move in, and welcome baskets. If you're a local business person and you want to provide something, or if you want to support those people that are moving in, we would love to work with you. And that's about it. So what questions do people have?
I've been asked to help procure some food for the grand opening celebration. So if anybody knows a restaurant owner that would like to welcome these new folks into Cedar Mill, contact me. And if you have a business that would like to welcome them, we can put out some literature too, I think. Fran?
First of all, thank you so much, Pastor, for informing us and for what you're doing. Could you, by any chance, if you have a website or at least something for your church to put in the chat here so that we could contact you if we have ideas about donations or whether it be resources or in-kind donations, etc. We would maybe put it in the chat for us.
Absolutely. It's easiest if I just hop on your keyboard.
Yes, mahalo nui. That means thank you very much. Yeah. And best wishes to you on your endeavors.
Thank you.
We've been following the progress of this from the beginning, and well, I kind of wanted a park on that land. But one thing that I thought about is we don't have a 1% for art program in Washington County, and I would really like to create one. But I know of a guy who makes amazing musician sculptures out of bits and pieces of old machinery. And I would like to look into donating or getting a few people to chip in and donate one of his amazing sculptures. This is the guy that lives just east of Cedar Hills Boulevard and Cornell. And you may remember before the Cornell roadwork, you may remember a parade of musicians made out of junk. And I think that would be really cool to have a couple of those guys in front of the building. So who knows?
That sounds great. Yeah, sounds fun.
All right, anybody in the attendees have a comment or?
But first, I'd just like to mention that the next meeting, the April CPO 1 meeting, will be an information session for all of the bonds and whatever on the ballot. And, you know, there's lots of things that will increase your taxes, or actually most of them will only continue items on your tax bill, and a few of them will be a slight increase. But you know what, folks? We live in a really, really cool community, and it couldn't stay that way unless these public agencies get the funding they need. So anyway, enough of that part. But we've got a couple of other topics that we're working on as well. So if you're putting together, you know, what you think you're going to vote for, please attend our April meeting.
Because it's the May election.
Correct.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we have done it again. I'm going to save the chat, and we will put this information on our Facebook page. We
I won't bother putting that in the chat because they won't see it until they get it.
Well, right. I mean, the chat is.
Well, just go to Facebook and up in the upper left-hand corner, search for CPO 1. CPO space 1. Hi, Mary Lou. Hey, hello, Mary Lou.
Hello, I just, this is just an aside. I don't know how to get my video on here. Maybe you don't need to see my face. There you go.
Anyway.
I just was shocked today because I went to the Beaverton post office to mail a bunch of things. And has anybody seen what is across the street from the post office lately? It is the biggest, most gigantic housing thing that I have seen in a long time. It is huge. It's just right across whatever that street is, Farmington. If you're in the parking lot at the post office and you look.
Oh, it's to the north?
Yes, it is just enormous. And I got to thinking, well, geez, this went up overnight.
Well, you know, it's not a bad thing to grow up rather than out.
Oh, for sure. But I
Let's keep
mean,
it all in Beaverton.
but
And that's
this
the
is,
Aloha, that's the Aloha post office, not the Beaverton post office.
no, it's the Beaverton post office.
Off of Canyon Road.
No,
The Beaver-
Farmington Road.
It's Canyon and Farmington. It's sort of, who
Okay,
knows
yeah.
where it.
It's Farmington Road. It's not far from that Fred Meyer store. And
Right.
yeah, well, it is
Cool.
enormous, but
Well, all
it's
those
under,
people will be able to walk
it's-
to Fred Meyer's to shop.
but it's under construction right now. But it just looks, I mean, it's just a massive like 5-story thing.
Yep.
It's just,
Yeah.
you know, because
Were
I
you
don't
Are you
get
opposed to it?
I don't get notices for that sort of thing, you know, in the LUT deal because it's Beaverton.
No, because it's Beaverton.
Right.
Yeah,
Can I-
I'll look into ways to get on the Beaverton mailing list, but I get some of their stuff. But Beaverton actually has a better page for current development than the county does. So I could put that on the CPO Facebook page.
Yeah, you could.
No, I'd prefer to have it down there than up here.
And then, you know where a Hall Street Bar and Grill used to be?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Well, we covered all of that.
That's turning into a giant apartment building.
It's only going to be the eastern parts of it. The western parts of it are going to be left alone.
Can you see the strategy here, which is Beaverton's urban area is going up so that they can preserve significant natural resources fairly nearby, so make them accessible, like Cooper
That's right.
Mountain. But the idea is to have intense density. Now, what we need to make sure, Mary Lou and others, is that they have trees and various other natural resources for people to look at, because everyone needs to be able to look at wildlife. That's very critical to mental health. So
Beaverton has also been emphasizing preserving Beaverton Creek through downtown Beaverton. I was very skeptical when they managed to scare Burgerville away because they wouldn't let them increase the size of their parking lot. But the reason that they did that was because they were daylighting Beaverton Creek. And so they're actually, you know, it kind of plays up the benefits of the city rather than Washington County, because they have the oomph to be able to say, no, this is going to be a daylighted creek and not a parking lot.
actually, this is an important factor. That is the Beaverton City Council. Their elected officials are very much in support of that balance between natural resources and urban. Our commissioners in Washington
More so than our commissioners
don't have that same mindset, and so LUT is obligated to follow the commissioners. So we all have to be really careful about looking at who we're electing as officials.
Yeah, my only gripe with this new construction is the way it looks. It, you know, it is not it's not artistic, you know. It's you know, it's just.
Yeah, I don't think Beaverton has 1% for art either.
Well, actually, Mary Lou, some of their other things, and I don't know that particular one, but in some of the other high density things that they've done in downtown Beaverton, they have a center quad, which has got natural resource trees and everything else on the inside. And so I'll show you some examples, but that's a way of building around trees and natural resources, but not necessarily out on the street. So,
well, I'm just all for making room for trees, and this new construction doesn't look like there's much room.
Well, I'm going to look at it, but anyway, the bottom line is it may be an eyesore from the street, but if it has what's needed for wildlife and for people's quality of life, that's really important. As
I've been saying,
being able to walk to a market, really important.
As I've been saying for the last 20 years, until we put gun emplacements in the passes, we're going to have to deal with growth.
Well,
so that might be
and maybe on that note, we can I move to adjourn.
I second. Okay, kids. Thanks.
Next meeting, I'm gonna be on the mainland.
I wish I could swap with you.